Korero ai Saiko no Rogue Yu-Gi-Oh! Dekurus. Look, I can sit here and tell you what they are, which I will. Chimera, Vanquisho, Infernal, Sprite, and Saiga Mamatsu Kasai. Of course, big dog, I'm going to be giving you a breakdown on why these particular decks are so powerful, and I'll also be putting personal deck lists onto my Patreon for helping me pay my editors. So without further ado, let's jump on in. So, I predict that there are going to be two different types of Yu-Gi-Oh! That you are going to be experiencing. One, it's going to be the try-hard Yu-Gi-Oh! Players that are going to mimic the Wombo Combo. And then two, the other Yu-Gi-Oh! Players that are suffering PTSD from Cast Your Rise Heart and want to use their graveyard. Which one are you? And because it is big dog, I've devised these Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks to be able to counter either or. I mean, that's what Rogue is all about. So let's jump on in with the first deck that I think is really good in Chimera. Now I would 100% say Chimera is a lot more suited if your Yu-Gi-Oh! Players around you are going to be more combo based. Chimera is a deck that could struggle with graveyard reliant decks because oftentimes you're going to be using Chimera the Phantom Beast King to be able to get rid of a card in your opponent's hand, and you don't want them to put a card in the graveyard that they want in the graveyard. But what I like about Chimera right now is that it can continuously whip cards out of your opponent's hand while at the same time giving you a ton of resources. Monsters like Guardian Chimera are a staple of that. Not only can it get rid of problematic cards that a combo player is trying to use to be able to make their combo going, it also can give you resources to be able to stop them. And because of this hand ripping and on-board destruction that the deck provides, it's pretty good at being able to stop your opponent from comboing off, which can shut down a lot of those popular Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks. Another thing that I really like about Chimera is that the deck gives you those remnants of branded without having to play all of the branded cards. Another thing that I like about Chimera is that the actual deck's engine is fairly small. That's right, big dog, this deck does not take up the space of a V8 engine, but more of a 98 Honda Civic, small, compact, and get straight to the point. That means you can put all types of things on your card to make it extremely powerful. I don't know about you, but I personally put flame stickers on my car to make it 10 times faster. An example of those flame stickers for the Chimera deck would be all of the hand traps or disruptive cards that you can play. It's really cool to be able to use those cards to not only slow down or even stop your opponent in their tracks, but also being able to get those disruptive cards in the process. It only can further solidify your deck at being able to stop your opponent's plays. And because the deck is already fusion based, being able to use the branded engine, which can help you search into your Chimera cards, or using super polymerization to break some of the most powerful combo boards is something this deck can very much do. It's definitely a deck that I've personally been having a lot of fun with testing, and hopefully it might be my deck for this format. The branded engine also makes Chimera ridiculous right now. I mean, Mirror Jade is no slouch, and this deck can easily summon it, as well as using Rinbrum in the graveyard to special summon itself or Albaz to fuse with the opponent's cards. I think that the players that have moved on from playing branded have started to play the Chimera deck because it gives them that old feel, but more importantly, Mirror Jade is an insanely powerful card. Another really powerful strategy that a lot of players have not been playing. Seriously, this video probably will be titled the most powerful decks that no one is playing because this deck is crazy good. My guy, Infernal! Infernal does everything you want in a combo deck like Vanadium. It can play through multiple hand traps and build a board, but this one's a little bit different. While Vanadium pretty much has to pray that your opponent doesn't have Drolling Lockbird, the Infernal deck can actually check forward using Neo Space Connector to be able to summon Neo Spacian Aqua Dolphin and look at your opponent's hand. This way, not only can you prevent your opponent from using a card like Drolling Lockbird, you also get to see if they have any other hand interruptions and then build your board accordingly. It's almost like you picked a combo deck, but you decided to play on hard mode if you didn't decide to play Infernal. Let me guess, you picked Charmander on Pokemon Blue. Not the move. And because of this, I think that Infernal has the highest combo potential, not only being able to spy on your opponent's hands, but actually being able to summon some inboards that other decks can't simply make because they don't play Infernal. Emperor Charles the Great is an unfair Yu-Gi-Oh card. I mean, who makes Link 1 monsters 3000 attack? It literally doesn't make any sense. Like, you're supposed to be little. And not only can stop important spell and trap card effects, it also can freely destroy cards on the field, and you can use multiple Emperor Charles the Great's effects in one turn, making it an absolutely boss of a Yu-Gi-Oh card that no other Yu-Gi-Oh combo deck has access to. But there's still more. Because of Angelica's Angelic Ring, not only can you gain 500 life points, which could come in handy, and prevent a monster from being untargetable, it actually can negate the first spell card your opponent uses every turn. And the cool thing about this is because of how this card is worded, it can actually stop powerful spell cards like Super Polymerization, which normally can't be stopped. Infernals have all of the tools to be one of the best decks in the game. All it takes is a big brain Yu-Gi-Oh player to be able to pilot to the top, and if I were to tell you who it is, it ain't gonna be me. Bro, I still gotta make sure my shirt ain't on backwards, so you know I'm not a combo player, I'm going right to the glue. If combos really aren't your thing and mashing buttons is typically how you win in fighting games, then I gotta tell you, you're definitely a glue eater like me, which means Vanquish Soul just might be your deck. My guy, step into the ring, it's fun. It's fun, step into the ring. Now I know a lot of players may just give Vanquish Soul a bad name. They say it's a deck that's built on there can be only one and that's the only way it'll win. My guys, if you broke and you never played the deck, just say that. It's simple. The reason why is because Vanquish Soul actually does require a modicum of a brain to be able to pilot. Managing the attributes in your hand to be able to use the Vanquish Soul monsters on the field is a lot harder than you think. You gotta think like 10 turns ahead to be able to micromanage these effects, or maybe again, that's just my brain going into overpower. I like to say one thing, me and my friends, we share a communal brain cell of one, and when one of us work in the brain cell, oh my God, we gotta count on our fingers and toes. But the saucy thing about Vanquish Soul is that it just got a lot more consistent with Vanquish Soul Long, and that actually would gave the deck enough power to be able to compete with the top decks. Who am I really kidding? Vanquish Soul has been topping at every most important event since it came out. Right now, Long is just icing on the cake, but the best thing about Vanquish Soul is that a lot of the most powerful hand traps in the game just so happen to fit the criteria for your Vanquish Soul monsters. Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion, really powerful card, just so happens to be Earth. DD Crow, another amazing card, just so happens to be Dark. Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. All of those not only fill pivotal roles for Vanquish Soul, the deck actually still does have enough space to be able to play a ton of Yu-Gi-Oh cards that can help you counter against some of the top meta Yu-Gi-Oh decks. It's a very powerful and versatile Yu-Gi-Oh deck that just so happens to be able to take advantage of a lot of glue-eating cards like Dimension Shifter, but do not mistake this deck as an easy deck to play. It's really rewarding, it's really complicated, but I gotta tell you, it's also really fun. But that also leads me to the fourth Yu-Gi-Oh deck that we've been talking about. Sprite is incredibly good at what it does. Not only does it make most hand traps in the game look completely foolish, it's a deck that moves to its own beat. You can play so many different types of Yu-Gi-Oh decks, just investing into the Sprite cards themselves is probably one of the best things that you can do for yourself. My guy, there's a long list of Sprite cards you can play. You can almost say that it is electrifying for your decks. There's Sprite Tri-Brigade, which just topped YCS Indianapolis. Same thing with Adventure Sprite. There's Sprite Gishki, Sprite Evil Twin, Sprite this, Sprite that. I used to be a Dr. Pepper fan until Sprite came around. And then of course there's my favorite, Sprite for Hire. Still, no matter where you put it, the best things about Sprite pretty much stay in every single one of the decks that I mentioned. You get free monsters to your field that can recruit other monsters, or they can be used to be able to stop some of your opponent's important spells, traps, or monster effects. You can also naturally insulate yourself from hand traps, but also monsters like Fantastical Dragon Phantasme, which are really powerful, and Nibiru the Primal Being are unsummonable once you resolve the effect of your gigantic Sprite. So if you just so happen to be a player that's going against players with a ton of hand traps, Sprite just might be for you, especially if they're using some of those Yu-Gi-Oh cards I just mentioned. And if you're a guy that changes Yu-Gi-Oh strategies like you change clothes, for some Yu-Gi-Oh players, you're still on the same strategy by that logic. If you are a Yu-Gi-Oh player and you like to change your deck as much as normal people like to change clothes, then Sprite just might be for you because it can change its variants fairly easily and relatively cheap for the most part. For that 5th and final slot, it was actually really hard. I was stuck between so many powerful Yu-Gi-Oh decks. Parts of me really wanted to talk about how slept on brand it is, and since players are reliant on summoning monsters for a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh decks, being able to use Gimmick Puppet Nightmare to lock them down is still really scary. And then another part of me wanted to mention that the runic cards are incredibly good for destroying your opponent's spell and trap cards, something that a lot of decks are reliant on. It's also a deck that can be played in a myriad of decks like Sprite, Fur Hire, Plunder Patrol, and you can also play it pure. But you wouldn't do that, right? Right? But out of all of the powerful Yu-Gi-Oh decks that have not been talked about enough, I had to go to a deck that's fairly popular and also had a new spin on it at YCS Indianapolis. Dragons are no stranger to being a really good Yu-Gi-Oh deck, but one thing that really piqued my interest was the usage of Vision Resonator in Crimson Gaia in the Dragon deck. I think it's a really exciting engine because Crimson Gaia can easily get you Vision Resonator, and Vision Resonator being a level 2 tuner monster can summon itself to the side of the field as long as there is a level 5 monster on the field, something that dragons can do extremely well. And if you guys have been playing dragons as long as me, you know that there's one thing that this deck has been missing. It's an easy access to a level 2 tuner monster that could potentially get you even more plays. At one point in time, we thought that Assault Synchron was it, and I don't think that it's a bad card. I think you could actually even still potentially use it, but this Vision Resonator engine is really cool. One thing that I will say is being able to easily synchro summon the monsters like Baron de Fleur and your Bestial Dispatter through cards like Stardust Excel Synchron is incredibly good, but what's really underrated is that dragons have always naturally been able to play through multiple hand interruptions. As you already know, my boys dragons don't bow down to no one, and this is a situation where it gets more dragon-tastic than most other situations. But there is another thing to note, the elephant in the room: you don't just run the Vision Resonator engine inside of dragons, you can take it a step further. If you stay true to the dragon deck, you can synchro summon into Scarred Red Dragon Archfiend, which can special summon Red Dragon Archfiend as 3,000 Choky Boys to your side of the field. Then if you use Scarred Red Dragon Archfiend for synchro material, you can wipe out your opponent's monsters. This actually creates a situation where dragons got so strong, it's a deck that can KO the opponent almost at whim. It's really powerful how dragons, if they go first, they can set up a really powerful board, but going second, they can actually just win the game outright. And this is all thanks to Black Atlas, the Master of Faster, the King of Disaster, and the Crimson King structure deck. I actually really knew that this was going to come out to be good somehow. And that's all that I got for some of the most underplayed, powerful Yu-Gi-Oh decks right now. Of course, there is one thing that I need from you from giving you this information: your undying loyalty. But I also want you to have an amazing day, and if you aren't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. I'm gonna catch you on the next video you're gonna click on, big dog.